A very good morning to all my students of class 12 Humanities. So in the last class we had a look at what the preamble is, isn't it? That means the preamble is an introduction to the constitution which gives us a brief idea as to what are the many features which are contained in the constitution. Now today we are going to concentrate on the salient features of the Indian constitution. Okay. Now what is the constitution? A constitution is a set of rules and regulations according to which a country is to be governed, isn't it? That means the union government and the state government, they are all going to derive the power from the constitution. And constitution is given a very superior position in the Indian state, okay, or in the Indian country. So moving on with the features. So first feature is written and a detailed constitution. So our Indian constitution is supposed to be one of the longest constitution in the whole world, and it is in a written form, okay. And it is a detailed constitution because it has been debated and enacted by the Constituent Assembly of India, which took almost 2 months, 2 years, 11 months and 18 days to complete the constitution for India, okay. So before there were 395 articles, 12 schedules and 94 constitution amendments, but the latest, okay, I am giving you the latest number, that is there are 448 articles in 25 parts, 12 schedules and 104 amendments have been made so far, okay. So the latest was made on January 25th, 2020. So the first constitution amendment was made in 1950, okay. Now second one is a self-made enacted constitution. That means the representatives of the people, okay, so who are the members of the Constituent Assembly. So it was their task, okay, or it was their initiative which they were able to give us the constitution for India, okay. And the framers of the Indian constitution, especially the members of the Constituent Assembly, so since it took them so many years to make the constitution for India, so all of those years what they were doing was they were studying the constitution of other nations, and many of the features have also been brought or also been borrowed from other constitutions of the world, okay. And finally the constitution was adopted on 26 November 1949 and it came into force on 26 January 1950, which we celebrate as the Republic Day, okay. Now thirdly, mixture of federalism and unitarism. So in India you have two sets of powers, isn't it? One at the center and one at the state. So the union government makes rules and regulations for the entire country, and the state governments makes rules and regulations for the concerned state. So you have two sets of powers, or there is dual administration. And then you have a written constitution where it is clearly mentioned now what are the powers which the union government is going to enjoy and what are the powers which the state government is going to enjoy, isn't it? So it is very much written down in a form of a book, the powers which the union and the state government is going to enjoy, isn't it? So these are some of the features of federalism. And then you have a unitary character as well, okay. That means sometimes in case if an emergency arises, so at that time the entire country assumes a unitary character. That means the state government will give up their powers and it will be handed over to the union government only. Now union government is going to make rules and regulations over the entire country. And then when you have a look at the three lists of subjects also, you have the union list, the state list and the concurrent list. So looking at the list also, you see that more subjects have been handed over to the union government, and those subjects are also of national importance. And when you have a look at the state government, so there are less powers handed over to the state government, isn't it? And then you have the concurrent list where both the union and the state government can make rules and regulations. But in case if they cannot come to a decision, isn't with regard to the rules and regulations which are to be made in the concurrent list, so it can be handed over to the union government, isn't it? So these are the features which shows that India, even though it is a federalism, but there are many unitary characters. So that's why India cannot be called a true federation, isn't it? Or you can call it a mixture of federalism and unitarism. So all of these points we have discussed in the previous lesson. So I would like you to go over these points once again. Okay, and then fourthly, we have mixture of rigidity and flexibility. So what do you mean by rigidity and flexibility? So rigidity means where the rules and regulations which are there in the constitution cannot be changed very easily or amended very easily, and flexibility means there are some rules and regulations which can be changed very easily. Okay, now first let's have a look at flexibility. Now there are many parts of the Indian constitution which can be changed very easily, or it can be amended very easily, just as an ordinary law can be changed. Okay, and then on the other hand, you have some parts of the Indian constitution or some parts where you cannot bring about changes very easily. Okay, a very difficult method is there. Maybe you require 2/3 majority of the members of the union government and the state government, isn't it? And all of these. Okay, so with regard to the changes to be brought about in the constitution, or to bring about amendments to the constitution, Article 368 gives us the full idea. So for this also you can refer to your chapter on constitution, where we have already done it in detail. Okay, now fundamental rights. So part 3C of the Indian constitution deals with the fundamental rights. Okay, from Article 12 to 35, and at present there are 6 fundamental rights. So why are these fundamental rights given to the people? For the all-around development. So besides obeying the rules and regulations, so certain amount of freedom also has to be given to the people. Okay, so thus we have the fundamental rights. So this one also we will be doing it in detail in the later chapters. Then you have the fundamental duties. So it is there in part 4A of the Indian constitution. Okay, Article 51 clause A. So fundamental duties means, now since you are a member or the citizen of India, so there are certain responsibilities you have towards the country. For example, when you are singing the national anthem, you don't sit and sing the national anthem. So what do? So you show respect to your country, you stand in attention motion, and at the same time now you have to maintain unity and integrity, though we are from different backgrounds, isn't it? But the unity, integrity of the individuals has to be maintained, and at the same time now there are so many heritages in India, or so many historical buildings in India, so you have to protect those buildings. You cannot go on scribbling on those buildings, isn't it? And then it is your duty to keep your environment clean, isn't protect the environment. And these are some of the duties which are mentioned in the fundamental duties, which each and every individual has to do, being a member or being a citizen of the Indian state. Now, directive principles of state policy. It is contained in part 4 of the Indian constitution. So what are directive principles of state policy? So they are instructions to the state, okay, for securing socio-economic developmental objectives through its policies. That means the state government or the union government has to make rules and regulations in such a way, okay, that it helps the people develop socially, economically, politically, educationally, culturally, etc. Okay, so this is in part 4 of the Indian constitution. So directive principle also we shall be doing this in detail in the other classes to come. Then you have bicameralism. So you are well versed with the term bicameralism. That means presence of 2 houses. So in India you have 2 houses, the lower house and the upper house. Okay, so lower house is the Lok Sabha, which is the house of the people, isn't it? And the Rajya Sabha is the representative of the state, and it is the upper house. So with regard to the election, mode of election, also you know that members of the Lok Sabha elected directly by the people, whereas the members of the upper house are elected indirectly by the people, and the number of members of the Lok Sabha is 552. Okay, and then with regard to your Rajya Sabha is 30, isn't it? So this way now, this proves that India has a bicameral legislature. So the lower house is going to represent the people, and the upper house is going to represent the state. So for this also, I would like you all to go through the chapter on the legislature, where it is clearly mentioned about bicameralism. Okay, and then you have a parliamentary system of government in India. So in India, there is a very close relationship between the executive and the legislature. So the executive is out of the legislature. And not only that, you have a difference between the nominal executive and the real executive. So nominal executive is the president and the real executive is the prime minister along with his council of ministers. So we have a parliamentary system of government functioning in India. Then you have adult suffrage. So adult suffrage means all the citizens of India who have reached the age of 18 or above 18, they have the right to vote for their representatives, because we know that India is a democratic country, isn't it? That means the people there themselves take part in the election of their representatives. So all the citizens who have reached the age of 18 or above 18, they have the right to vote for their representatives. So there is no discrimination made on the basis of caste, creed or the color or the gender. So everyone can take part in the election process except the minors, that means the children or the adults or the people who have not reached the age of 18. Okay, so they are not allowed to take part in the election process. But once they reach the age of 18, they have the right to vote for their representatives. Okay, so this is the adult suffrage. Then single citizenship. Now, though India has two sets of government, one at the center and one at the state, isn't it? So the citizens should be enjoying double citizenship, isn't it? But in India we have a single citizenship. That means we acquire the citizenship of the state of India only. That means we are just known as Indians. We are not known as citizen of Sikkim, citizen of Tamil Nadu, isn't citizen of Kerala, etc. So we acquire the citizenship of India itself, because all of the states in which we are living is actually not a state, because they don't possess sovereignty, isn't it? So they are parts of the union. So we have just one single citizenship, that is, we are known as the Indian citizen. Now, single integrated judicial system. Now, in India, even though you have two sets of powers, one at the center and one at the state, but the judiciary is a single integrated judicial system. That means the judiciary is arranged in a hierarchical order, with the district court at the lowest level, with the high court, okay, at the state level, and the Supreme Court at the highest level. That means you do not have separate courts which are going to deal with problems or issues or cases which is concerned only with the state government. No. So any cases which have been brought to the district court, and when decisions have been given and if they are not satisfied with the decision, then they can make an appeal to the High Court. And High Court also gives its decision, and if the people are still not satisfied with the decision, then it is finally taken to the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court is the highest court of justice, isn't it? That means it is the highest court of appeal. That means you cannot have any courts above your Supreme Court. Okay, so it is arranged in a hierarchical order, with the district court at the lowest level, with the state court at the state level, and then High Court, and then we have the Supreme Court at the highest level. Now, next one is independence of the judiciary. So, though we have said that the judiciary is the third organ of the government, but it is always kept free from the control of the executive and the legislature. So, it works as a separate department. So, that's why the people have so much of faith in the judiciary, because it gives justice to the people. So, how can you maintain the independence of the judiciary? That means whenever the judges are appointed, so they are appointed by the executive, that is the president. And then only those individuals who have a wide knowledge about law, they get elected or they get appointed as the judges. And besides that, when the judges are in office, they are paid a very handsome salary. And then after the retirement also, they get a large amount of pension benefits. Okay, so after their retirement, so they are not allowed to practice with law, but they can head some of the inquiry commissions. Okay, so with this, the independence of the judiciary is maintained in India. And then you have the emergency provisions also mentioned in the Indian Constitution. So emergency can be declared under Article 352, 356 and 360. So 352 when there is a threat of war or external aggression, and 356 when there is a constitutional emergency, and 360 when there is a financial emergency. So at that time the Indian state assumes a unitary character. That means the state government has to give all the powers to the union government. That means the state government will become helpless at that time. So everything is going to be managed by the central government. And finally, you have special provisions relating to the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. Okay, so our Indian government or our Indian state, or let's say now when we are voting, isn't it? So the counting is done, but everything is done on the majority basis. But there are people also belonging to the minorities. Okay, so they come under the category of the scheduled tribe and the scheduled caste. So certain provisions are handed over to these individuals because they are less in number, especially with regard to admission or with regards to education or with regard to job. So certain seats are reserved for the people belonging to the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, so that they can also come with the same, okay, or come at the same level with the rest of the categories of individuals. Okay, and besides that, the president also nominates 2 members to the Lok Sabha from the Anglo-Indian community, because it is felt that they do not have equal representation in the Lok Sabha. Okay, so these are some of the features of the Indian Constitution. So what I would like you all to do is go through all of these features, and if you want to know the detail about these features, you can go over the chapters which we have already done in the previous classes. Okay, so with this we come to the end of the explanation of the salient features of the Indian Constitution. Stay home, stay safe. Thank you. Have a nice day.